This morning, I want us to pay attention to the role of suffering in our spiritual formation. Specifically, what it looks like for us to deal with some of the things that sit in the sediment of our soul. Oftentimes, when we go out to the beach and you look at the waves, maybe in Galveston, if that's all the waves you got, if you look at those puny waves of Galveston, the waves are not they're not occurring because of just the wind on the surface. It's because there's stuff that's going on below the surface. And in our spiritual formation, as we set out on the trailhead, as it were, in regards to spiritual formation, as you lay down the practices of prayer, as you lay down the practices of Sabbath, as you move towards community and generosity and service, it works like one simple step at a time. But in the process of it, you create space and you create separation from your normal habits and your normal rhythms that allow you to see the things that are resting at the bottom of your soul that maybe you haven't dealt with before. This is the role of suffering as we pay attention to spiritual formation. Suffering has a way of refining us if we allow it. Suffering has a way of revealing to us the things that matter the most. Y'all remember isolation in 2020? You remember very quickly what was essential, because it all flew off the shelves at the store. Water and toilet paper. Y'all were buying it like we couldn't make toilet paper on our own. Like toilet paper was never going to be in existence. Like that's the first thing. I'm thinking to myself, really, guys? Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But as we pay attention to the spiritual journey, I want you to understand that all of us are going to deal with pains in life. As it is once said, you are either coming out of a storm, going through a storm, or about to be in a storm. Suffering and pain is inevitable for all of us. The question is what do we do with it? And how do we manage it? Pete Scazzaro says this: it is impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. It is impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. As you set out on the trailhead of spiritual formation and you begin to create the separation that is needed to see some things that you're dealing with in your life, many of us have not dealt with our emotions in such a way that helps us to begin to move towards spiritual maturity. This is what I mean by this. Some of us are so emotionally immature that the moment that things get hard, we want to get out from underneath of it because we don't realize what's happening in the middle of it. Some of us can be so spiritually immature in regards to our emotions, or emotionally immature, in regards to our emotions, that we constantly use our anger as a defense towards God, thinking that we're going to just continuously be angry towards him. He's the one that's caused all these issues. You see how difficult it would be to continue to follow Jesus if you're constantly angry with the Father. So today, let's look at 3 things that we do with our emotions, with our suffering, with our pain, that leads us sometimes to a very unhealthy spot. The very first one is deny. Deny. Listen, it is no shocker that this is our proclivity, just to deny the pain. Anybody? Like, it is easier just to act like it didn't happen than to actually face it. It's easier in regards to things that we've walked through, to the pain that we have occurred, to the suffering that we might be going through, to act like it just didn't happen. Problem with this approach is that it will leave us in a very broken state following the denial. You don't believe me? Go to your doctor, and let's just say you have a chronic pain that is happening, something that is underlining and something that is incredibly serious. If you don't move forward with treatment, and if you don't move forward with the recommendation, you're going to end up in a very unhealthy spot. The same is true with our emotions. The same is true with the pain that we feel. The same is true with the suffering that we endure. If we do not face it, it has the potential to have control of our heart and our life. Psychologists say that you must name it in order to tame it. You have to be able to face the pain and face the reality of whatever emotion that is there. Otherwise, if you keep denying it, it will keep eroding away at the sediment of your soul, and eventually you'll come to a moment where you just snap. You ever had that? You're just sitting there waiting for your chips and salsa, and you just go off on the waiter like you have every right. Your wife looks at you like, dude, what is your problem? You're like, I don't know where that came from. I just heated today. Anybody? Driving down 45 and you don't know what came over you. You just laid on the horn. You didn't even push it. You just punched the horn and you just sat there. And you're like, what is happening to me right now? Yelling at your kids, wondering, why am I yelling at them? Look at them. They're so sweet. Just overstimulated in that moment, right? Just yelling at them, snapping at them. We're trying to figure out what is happening. Oftentimes, these are the waves on the surface of life that something is happening below surface. Dealing with the anxiety and stress, dealing with insecurities, dealing with lust, dealing with all of the things that we tend to deal with, oftentimes have a root deep down in our heart. But many of us are denying that it's even there. Now, please hear me, guys in the house. I just want to let you in on this because you hear me maybe talking about emotions or feelings. And most men in our society today are not taught to sit there and feel emotion. Like that's not what we're going to do. It's like that old Friends episode with Bruce Willis who tapped into his emotions and then couldn't stop crying. You're like, that's not going to be me, right? And most guys don't want to deal with your emotion, but can I just let you in on a little secret? If you are not emotionally healthy, it will bleed into your leadership at home. It'll bleed into your leadership in the workplace. You have to learn how to deal with your emotions and deal with them in a way that is healthy. Maybe some of you do need to cry, and that's okay. Maybe some of you need to know that your whole world isn't held together by you white-knuckling everything, but that you can release some things. You see, in order to be emotionally healthy, we have to begin to be aware of the emotions that are lying beneath the surface, and we have to be aware of the pain that has happened to us. Otherwise, we will continuously deny and deny and deny and deny, leading us to very unhealthy places, leading us to places where our marriages are feeling it, leading us to places where our coworkers notice it, leading us to places where our kids are suffering from it. Don't deny it. Name it. We see Jesus in this moment moving to the Father, and I love what the text says. He began to feel the sorrow. You have permission, if don't miss this. You have permission to feel your pain. You have permission to feel your emotions. Jesus in this moment does not deny his emotions. He does not deny the suffering. He does not deny what is in front of him. Instead, he allows his soul to feel and experience that pain, but he takes it to the only person who can do something about the pain, and he moves to prayer to his Father and say, God, I'm feeling this. If it's possible, take this cup from me, but ultimately, I trust your will. He doesn't deny it. He moves to the Father. He's incredibly in tune with what he is feeling. He's sorrowful, and he moves to the Father. Don't deny what's happening in your soul. Instead, begin to name it and move to the Father for healing. Secondly, we'll either deny or we will detach. Detach. This one's probably the easiest one. This one gets everybody, though, in a lot of ways. Have you ever noticed that in a season of pain, in a season of loss, in a season of great suffering, one of our proclivities is to move directly to isolation. Like, we don't want to be around anybody. We don't want to have conversations with anybody. We don't want our wives asking us. Wives, you don't want your husband asking you. We don't want our parents asking us. We don't want anybody in the middle of our pain and suffering. One of our knee-jerk reactions is to detach, to get ourselves out of community, and to put ourselves in isolation. And can I just let you know that that moment of isolation is one of the most dangerous places you can put yourself. Whenever you're dealing with trauma, whenever you're dealing with suffering, whenever you're dealing with pain, that moment of isolation is where Satan does his greatest work on your mind. It's where the enemy comes in and exposes insecurities. The enemy comes in and begins to tell you things that are not true. It's one of the greatest places where he does his work. Don't move towards isolation. Instead, move towards community. Now, please hear me. Don't hear me say that it's not wrong to take a moment for yourself to grieve. Don't hear me saying that is wrong. No, you need to take a moment to grieve. You need to take a moment to feel the pain. You need to take a moment to shed the tears. But when the tears have stopped and you've begin to make excuses for moving towards community, that's when you realize you start having a problem. Don't detach. Don't detach. Instead, move towards community. The other way we detach is we detach our emotions altogether. We detach our emotions altogether. One of the quickest ways to know that you are burning out or you are in the mode of burnout, you no longer celebrate the high highs and you can't feel the low lows because you've detached yourself from the emotions of it. This one I know everybody feels. You know why? Because this is the moment we start to feel numb. And if there's one word that describes our entire generation, it's probably the word numb. We're just numb to everything nowadays. Oh, there's a war breaking out, numb to it. Oh, another election, numb to it. Oh, another pandemic, numb to it. Oh, another financial crisis, numb to it. We're occurring one thing after another, so much so that we've detached ourselves from our emotions and we just kind of journey through life numb. And if you want to take it out of the macro standpoint, just bring it into the micro level of your life, where you start to detach and no longer can you celebrate with your wife or with your husband. No longer are you celebrating with your family, or you are going through some really low lows, but you could care less because you are just navigating life numb. Don't feel it anymore. This is the thing that most of us feel, and the separation, please don't miss this. The journey towards spiritual formation, when you set out on the trailhead, please hear this. Those pieces, those practices provide the space of separation for you to evaluate your numbness. Don't miss this. Many of us don't know how to start feeling things again because we have no space to evaluate what's going on in our hearts. So our calendars dictate everything. We just move from one thing to the next. We just go to the next party, to the next relationship, to the next church, to the next. We grow numb, and we need separation to evaluate what's happening in our soul. I mentioned this in the 9 o'clock, and I dropped her a couple of weeks ago, but nobody seems to be excited about her, and that's perfectly fine. I don't care where you land on the spectrum of Taylor Swift, whether you're the biggest Swiftie or whether you can't stand her. It doesn't matter to me, honestly. In her new album, though, she has a lyric that I think staples a generation to the core. She says, "I'm so depressed." Anybody want to finish it? I'm so depressed I act like it's my birthday. Yeah, she was bopping. I was waiting for you to tell me the lyric. I'm so depressed I act like it's my birthday every day. I'm so depressed. Just listen to the undertones of that. I'm so depressed I act like it's my birthday every day. Okay, let me translate that. I'm so depressed or I'm so numb that I gotta move from one celebration to the next. I'm not truly celebrating it, but I gotta keep my heart and my head in celebration mode constantly, because if I were to come down to the numbness that I feel in my heart, I don't know what to do with those emotions. So we move from one celebration to the next. We move from one vacation to the next. And please hear me, vacation ain't wrong. You need the space sometimes from vacation. But if vacation is the thing that you run to because you are so numb, then it could be a problem, could be problematic. We move from one relationship to the next. We move from one high to the next. We move from one thing to the next. Why? Because if we stopped and if we slowed down and if we created the separation to examine our soul, we may not like what we find at the bottom of it. It is far easier for us to continue to move from one thing to the next and say, I'm depressed, but praise God, it's my birthday every single day, than it is to slow down and say, God, would you heal my heart and my soul? Now, Swifties, don't send me any hate mail, okay? Y'all can, it wasn't me hating on the lyric, just me giving you some reality. So we will deny it, we'll detach from it, and as we detach, we become numb. And when we become numb, thirdly, we drug. We drug. Now listen, some of y'all are like, hard drugs? For some of you, it might be. I don't know your story. But for some of you, you don't need a physical drug to drug yourself. You can drug yourself on entertainment. You can drug yourself on Amazon.com. Just one more purchase, y'all. Do y'all ever feel this? Like, here's the crazy part. I don't even have my own Amazon account. I don't. I wouldn't know what we're buying, okay? My wife has the Amazon account, okay? And I feel this, though, because she laughs at me. I'm the guy that falls for the ads, like on Instagram, and then I tell her to go buy it, right? Sometimes I'll buy something she doesn't know, and it arrives at the door, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, honey. I don't know what happened. But do you ever notice that the lie behind materialism is that it's just one more purchase and it'll fix our happiness? That's the lie. I said in the 9 o'clock, I was like, some of y'all are so tired of opening and closing your curtains. You're like, I just need that motorized curtain roller. I can just press it. The smart house, like somebody, there's just one more buy to fix all of our problems, right? Because we're numb. So we drug ourselves. It's one more scroll through our Instagram feeds, one more scroll through everything that we're feeding ourselves constantly on the day-to-day basis. It's one more drink. It's one more relationship. It's one more one-night stand. It's one more relationship that you don't want to fully commit to, so you stay cohabitating without committing. All of the responsibility not on your shoulders, but all of the benefits of marriage. We drug ourselves. And we move to these things daily. We drug ourselves with our calendars. Just like I said, we move so fast and so quick that we're not paying attention to what's happening. The question that you need to ask yourself is what is your drug? What is it? What is the thing that you run to? You're like, well, I've never done any hard drugs in my life. But you can catch me binge watching everything on Netflix. What is it that drugs you? What is the thing that when you are numb, you run to for escape? These are the things that happen to our heart and our soul. We detach, we deny, and ultimately we end up in a place of drugging ourselves. Jesus would offer a better solution. Jesus would say that there is a better way and a better pathway. And Jesus' invitation here and his example here in Matthew 26 is he's saying, I'm feeling all of these emotions. I'm becoming sorrowful. He's sweating blood because he knows the cross that is before him and the pain and suffering that's going to happen to him. And he goes and he cries out to the Father. I just want to let you know that you have permission to feel your pain, but take your pain to the Father. Take your suffering to the Father. What role does suffering have in the life of a believer? The role that it has is moving towards God and finding God in the middle of your pain and in your suffering. If you find God in the middle of your pain and suffering, it will turn into the greatest success of spiritual formation. But if you allow pain and suffering to push you away from God, it will be the very thing that sabotages your spiritual formation. Because the moment you feel pain in your life, you either go one or two ways. You look at God and you blame him for everything. You blame him for the pain. You blame him for the tragedy. You blame him for the things that you can't fully understand. And your heart becomes hard and calloused towards him. The amount of friends that I've sat with who have dealt with church hurt, the amount of friends that I've sat with who've lost significant loved ones, who've walked through significant trauma, who've lost a friend to suicide, all of these things have a potential of either shaping us or hardening our heart towards the things of God. My encouragement to you is that you would allow them to shape you and form you and see what God is doing on the other side of the suffering. So here's what we can learn from Jesus. Here's his invitation, and here's how we should take our pain. Here's how we should move in suffering. Here's what we should do. 3 quick things. First and foremost, draw near to God. Draw near to him. Before you run to drug yourself, draw near to God. Draw near. Listen, I'm not asking for you to make some perfect prayer. I'm not asking you for this to be an over-spiritualized thing. I'm not asking you, please, and don't miss this. Some of you who grew up in an overly charismatic background, I'm not asking you to move to prayer to allow prayer to be a Band-Aid for your pain. Some of you are trying to pray away some significant pain. But in the process of praying it away, you are denying it. Do you need to move to prayer in your pain? Yes. That's why a younger generation doesn't move to prayer. Because you're being fake with your prayers because you're not actually naming what the problem is. You're just masking it with some fake superficial prayer. And the younger generation is saying, why do I need to move to prayer for that when I have something else that could probably fix me elsewhere? No. When you move to God and draw closer to God in prayer, you're not doing something that is superficial. Instead, move to God in prayer where you name it, where you bring the pain to light, where you come to him with honesty and brokenness and humility and say, God, I don't understand these things that are happening to me, but would you use this some way, somehow to shape me? Would you use this some way, somehow to refine me? Would you use this some way, somehow for your glory? And can I tell you, before you ever get to the prayer of saying, God, would this be for your glory? It's okay just to be simply honest and say, God, this all hurts, before you even get to a resolution. But draw closer to God. It's what Jesus does in the garden. Jesus moves closer to his Father. He doesn't run away from his Father. He doesn't point the finger back to his Father and say, this is all your fault. This is all your plan. But Jesus submits himself to his Father's plan in his pain and in his suffering. So draw closer to God in the middle of it, church. Don't run away from him. Don't go run and drug yourself. Don't go run and detach yourself from community. Don't go and deny that it's not happening. Just trust God in the middle of it and say, God, I need you right here, right now in the middle of my pain. Because look at me, I look around the room and I know there's significant pain that sits in the room. I know that there's children that have been lost. I know that there are loved ones who are no longer with us. I know that there's divorces that you couldn't help. I know that there are things that you could not help. Abuse that has been occurred. Church hurt that's been occurred. Man, the pain. Jesus says to move to the Father. Can I just be perfectly candid? There's no amount of messages that I could say, no amount of words that I could possibly say, no amount of podcasts that you could possibly listen to. I know therapy helps, and I encourage you to move towards that. The true healing of your soul and the brokenness that you feel from the world of sin that we live in is found when we draw closer to the Father and allow him to heal our hearts and souls. But you have to fight for that space, because so many of us are giving up on the Father because we're saying he's not doing it fast enough. The switchback of life, the trailhead of life is not fast paced. It's one step in front of the other. So draw closer to him and don't deny the feelings, but allow him to heal it. You cannot heal what you will not bring forward to the light. Secondly, decide to learn from it. Emotional health happens when we're aware of our feelings and we're not run by our feelings. You have to be aware of the emotions that you're feeling, but secondly, you have to understand that those feelings cannot run you. So decide to learn from the pain and suffering that you're going through. Decide to allow it to produce something new in your heart and in your life versus giving up and tapping out. Decide that God is doing something in the middle of it, even if you don't fully understand it. It is the tapestry illustration that I use in every wedding that I ever give. It is the fact that the back of a tapestry, it is threads, it is knots, it is different colored threads, it is loops, it is stitches, it is cuts, and none of it makes sense. None of it looks like it is producing anything. But the moment you flip the tapestry over, there's a beautiful picture of what was being woven together through all of the twists, through all of the turns, through all of the knots, through all of the stitches, through all of the pains. There was something that was happening that God was weaving together in your life. The problem is this. For those of you who are in the middle of pain right now, you're in the middle of the switchback and it hurts. And you just don't know if you're going to get through it. Would you just trust God and persevere through it so that you can get to the top of that switchback and then begin to look back to see what God was producing? And that picture only develops over time, like a Polaroid in the dark room. It only takes time to see what God was doing. But you got to trust him in the middle of it. So decide to learn from it. And lastly, decide to deepen your faith in the middle of it. Some of the most honest prayers you can pray with God are the ones that don't make any sense. Some of the most painful times in your life when you don't have the answer. And the sweetest times is when you move to God and say, God, I need you. I remember in 2020, and I close with this, 2020 was a difficult year for a lot of people, obviously. And as a pastor, it was increasingly difficult because every pastor was wrestling with what do we do with not meeting. And I've already disclosed to you as a community the pain that has occurred in my family from 2020 all the way through, honestly, even to the very beginning of this year. But in the middle of the unknown, in the middle of the things that I couldn't control, and please hear me, 2020 and the pain of not knowing what was going to happen is trivial to some of the pain that y'all have occurred. Okay? I understand that. But the thing that I decided to do in that moment was not to run from God. It wasn't to be mad at God. I just wanted to move towards him. And so for the year 2020, my garage became my safe haven. It became my place of prayer. It became my secret place with God. For some of you, that's the car. For some of you, you have a closet. For some of you, you need to find a spot. I don't know where it's at. But just as Jesus was dealing with the pain of the garden and drove him to a place of sweating blood because he was so distraught, I think the greatest thing that your suffering can do is bend your knees of security to a sovereign God. Some of you go through suffering and you come out harder on the other side because you never took a moment to bow your knee. What do I mean by this? Suffering has the ability to bring us to a place where we just don't understand. As Americans, we stand on the fact that we can grit through the pain. We're built on building the American dream and doing everything in our own strength. But the moment that suffering hits our lives, you can either resist it, and you can try to bear the load on your own strength by carrying it on your own shoulders. Or you can allow your knee to be bent before a holy God who is sovereign, in submission to him, and say, God, I don't understand. Do you know that's okay? So I prayed in 2020 on my face with tears saying, God, I don't understand what you are doing. But when you move to that place of submission, do you know what this does? It separates you from your own strength. Some of you aren't healing in your emotions and your pain because you're still gritting through the pain. And you need to separate yourself from your own strength and come to a place of submission before the Father and say, God, I do not understand what you are doing, but I trust you. Because pain has occurred, because suffering has occurred, because things in your life don't seem to make sense, because you don't know if you're going to make it another day, because you keep drugging yourself, because you keep numbing your emotions, and just say, God, I need you, to a place of surrender before him. Because suffering is the place, if we allow it, that brings us to a place to meet God and to learn about God's character and to learn about his grace and to learn that he is the good shepherd who will guide your soul. So what are you going to do with your pain and suffering, church? Today, my challenge is not for you to detach, not for you to deny, not for you to drug, but I challenge you this week to draw closer to the Father. To decide to yourself that you're going to learn something from the pain that you're going through. And then to deepen your faith in God, who is sovereign and holy and just, who loves you deeply. And like a good father wants to hold you and heal your heart and heal your pain and heal your soul. Let's pray this morning. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's message on our Wake Church YouTube channel. I pray that this was an encouragement to you and that you are challenged to grow deeper in your faith. If this message has encouraged you, do us a favor and go ahead and share it with a friend. And make sure to subscribe to this channel for more weekly content just like this, and you'll be notified when we go live on Sunday mornings. Lastly, we want to say thank you for your generosity. If you'd like to support our mission, you could go to wakechurch.com/give or simply click on the give button on the screen. Thanks again for tuning in. We love you.